Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with PMTT. I am joined tonight by Paddy. You can see him in the top left hand corner looking as wonderful as ever. How you going tonight, man?
Good mate, yourself?
Yeah, really good, really good. So I've got Paddy on tonight because he attended and won the Gauntlet Finals for 2024. It is a huge achievement. He beat out another about 40 players across 4 events. He's wielding the gauntlet itself.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was a fantastic achievement. I thought the day went really well as well. It was really smooth from a TO's perspective. How did you find the finals, man?
Yeah, that was fine. Very well run. I didn't have any issues. Everything sort of was going to time. I don't think there was any issues in regards to that. But yeah, it was a good day. I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. So we've got Paddy on tonight because as far as series go in Age of Sigmar, Gauntlet is probably the premier series in Australia, mainly by lieu of the fact that it's the only big series in Australia. But I'm going to claim that title anyway. Until someone else can do a series, I'm going to claim that title. But the more people who run more events means that it just becomes this bit of an arms race to have the best event, which is kick ass for the players because it means that they get a ton of awesome events.
Yeah.
So we're talking tonight with Paddy about how he kind of the list that he brought, how his games went, how he kind of planned the overall series, and would he come back? So let's get into it, man. So you brought KO. Give us a
Yes.
crash course through your list.
So I just had sort of the standard heroes and things like that. Well, I had a choice. So originally, when I was playing KO, I usually take a big block of Thunderers, stick it in an Ironclad, sort of very stereotypical Caradron list. I fly around and shoot stuff, etc., etc. Based it on some of the armies that I knew were going to show up at the event, I decided that that was not the way to go forward. Just on the basis of it had some pretty bad matchups. So I decided on switching things a little and took, rather than taking mass thunderers, I took a lot of Arkanauts instead. And I also took a lot of ships. So the army that I took for Caradrons was it played objectives well, which is a bit odd for Caradrons because Caradrons generally don't play objectives like the main objectives too well. They always do battle tactics well, but they don't do like main objectives particularly well, just because their board presence is not strong. But with the current list that I did take, I had enough units and enough models on the board that I could at least have a bit more of a presence when I was playing against people. So I took an admiral, a navigator, and a chemist. I took the usual combo of a navigator with a voidstone orb, which auto dispels a spell. Because currently in our current sort of not in our meta, but it just in the meta in general, a lot of people are taking like your sort of bog standard wizards with like Merciless Blizzard. And Merciless Blizzard absolutely destroys Caradron airships. So
Yep.
which there is a story about that, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Um, but yeah, those sorts of things. So you got to try and stop a lot of that stuff. Plus, also the admiral was also my general. I gave him Stormcaller, which allows you to reroll the navigator's ability for either the Aether Storm or I can't remember the other ability. I think it's called like the Flying Winds or something, where it just moves your ships, makes your ships a little bit faster. So I took those three, and then obviously a chemist for buffing, the rend on my shooting, and then I took 20 Arkanauts, 10 Arkanauts, 10 Arkanauts with max specials, so Skyhawk volley guns and sky pikes. Arkanauts are pretty good, I personally believe.
Well, and
They
you proved on the weekend as well. So
Yeah, they're a very under. I'll be honest, I think they're a very undercosted unit. In a Caradron army, they just have a lot of utility. Their shooting, while not being at Thunder level, is still not shit. Like they are still a half decent shooting unit. Um, Especially with my 20 man. I didn't get to over the course of this event, but generally I usually get a triumph. So like my 20 man unit, as long as you're contesting an objective, which most people are generally are going to do, you get +1 to hit when with glory hogs. So you get +1 to hit. You have a triumph, which is +1 to wound. You're firing unit Arcanauts. You're getting 29 shots at threes and threes at Ren 1, possible Ren 2 for 1 damage, and then another 46 shots, and then another 2 more shots at threes and twos. It all stacks up, and for 180 points, you just can't really go wrong with that. So,
Yeah, at that point, it's
um,
just kind of weight of dice is what you're going to push through. You don't need the
well,
elite shooting. You just got numbers.
yeah, well, a lot of the stuff at the moment is more about volume, because of save stacking. There's a lot of stuff in the game at the moment that just can save stack out its butthole, and most of its save characteristics aren't crash hot. They're like 5 ups, 4 ups. So just rolling a bunch of dice at people is usually enough just to force all those failed saves and just punch through anyway, more than trying to go like high rend 3 shooting or high rend or whatever. Is usually not the way to go, I feel. But yeah, I took that, and then I just had 5 airships. So I had a clad, 2 frigates, and a gun hauler.
Yep. Yep.
And because I was Barrack Zilfin as my skyport, my frigates were battle line,
Yep.
because that's what happens in Zilfin. Um, so it allows you to get around some of the dropping problems that having lots of airships would, because they're usually behemoths. But because you take them in Zilfin, they become battle line. They lose
Yep.
the behemoth thing, etc., etc.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, just lots of wounds, lots of shooting, and then obviously I've got honor is everything in my army. So my whole army rallies on 4s, not 6s.
Yep.
So those little Arcanaut units, like my 20 man, are actually kind of semi hard to get rid of, because even if I've got like 2 or 3 left, you can bring them up to 13. You can etc., and just
Yep.
keep rejuvenating, and playing objectives. And then I take trusting your guns, so I can reroll 1 of 1 once in my shooting phase, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Uh, so I don't know why that's a thing, but it for some reason I seem to roll ones when I fire cannon shots, so it always just lines up perfectly.
Yep.
And then I took uh, without our ships we are naught, so you can spend 2 command points on a sky vessel instead of spending one,
Yep.
once per game, and it's just like something like flying high and then combat landing out, disembarking out, and then obviously because I'm taking Zilfin, I get um, two engine works on my ships. So I get basically 2 relics on my ships,
Yep.
which is last word. So then when you charge the clad, you got to deal with an unleash hell. Then you might have to deal with a supremacy mine. Then you might have to deal with a cannon shot as well. So it's like 3 sets of shooting just coming on the way in,
Yeah.
which really hurts a lot of players and proved quite pivotal in one of my games. And then I took a Malefic Sky Mine on one of my frigates, so I could do some mortal wounds to stuff that flies. So
Yep. Yeah, no, very nice, very nice. A very, like you said, it's not the standard KO list,
no,
but it still plays very kind of not aggressively, but very mid board. A kind
yeah.
of very much more in your face than a standard KO list plays. At least that was my assessment from watching a lot of your games. So.
Well, yeah. So like even like your sort of basic Arcanaut units inside frigates, when you'd like charge in with a frigate, deal some mortal wounds because of the battering ram, and then you get out and get into combat. Now Arcanauts are not great in combat, but if you're fighting something like an Ungor Raider or something, it still means you don't have to waste time shooting at the Ungor Raider. You can just charge it into combat and then kill them that way, because Arcanauts having a 4 up save base is pretty strong.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah,
then
definitely.
Arcanaut cutters as well are really good as well. So
Yeah, no, very nice, very nice. Now, the matchups for the finals were released early because they are organised. So the person that comes in first in the gauntlet plays the guy coming in eighth, second plays seventh, third plays sixth. So you knew that you were going to be playing Brad and his Gloomspite Gits very early. Unfortunately, Brad dropped the night before, so all of Paddy's preparation was for naught. And he got paired into Matt with his Gargants. Give us a run through of how that game went down.
um, it's sort of a standard matchup, unless you're going like engine rigger heavy, for Caradrons. If you've got a lot of like half decent shooting, It's usually a bad time for the Gargants. They just kind of can't really, like, all it takes for you as a KO player is to kill like one Gargant and all the baby ones, and then they just lose so much momentum because they've either got to stay on objectives, or if they disappear off objectives and chase you, you can just teleport and take the objectives back off them.
Yeah.
But when I did, that's exactly what I did against Matt. I drew him out one of his Gargants because it could run and charge. It ran into my Ironclad. It didn't kill it, but it crippled it, which was fine because I didn't have anything in the clad. I just sort of left it up there a little bit, just enough for him to basically bait him in to charge it.
Yep.
And then he did that. I was able to counterattack with my gun hauler and my other um, frigates. As a consequence, as well, plane carrierdrons, their guns do not degrade on any of their ships, which is the silliest
Yep.
thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So even though my ship was crippled, it was still firing at full effectiveness. And I basically turn one, blew away one of his little gargants, and blew away his big gargant.
Yep.
Um, we went to a priority. I won it. I gave it back to him because I didn't need to double him. Because of my navigator as well, I was crippling his other gargants from moving too quickly at me.
Yep.
So they weren't really getting charges turn two, sort of turn three, and it just sort of steamrolled after that because you start killing all the other little gargants, etc., etc. It's just not a good time for the gargants, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Once you kind of take that attrition lead, it's
Yep.
very difficult for the Gargant's player to be able to pull it back and get kind of back in the game,
Yep.
especially at an event like this where everyone is a very solid player, and so yeah, he's kind of really heavily relying on you making a big mistake, which is fairly easy once you kind of, as long as you continue to score the same as him and you've got the attrition lead, you can just play it safe, play it smart, and just kind of go for the long game.
Well, that's it. If he sits on objectives, I just sit back at distance and keep shooting. So it's a lose lose situation. You either sit there and just have to roll dice and hope you stay alive, or you come at me and then hope you can do damage while still rolling dice and trying to stay alive. There's no real good solution to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Now that is one of the games that we did record. So pending a review on the quality of the recording and any profanity filters that we need to apply, we
There might have
will.
been a few. Uh,
So we're hoping to do. I'm hoping to do some commentary over that video. But as what happened with last year, I didn't have time. I just kind of ran out of it over Christmas, so I just kind of released the videos on YouTube. So you'll be able to check out that game either way at some time later on the channel. So, but you got through round one. So there's now 4 people who are undefeated. And your second round was against Aaron and his Soul Blight. How did that one go down?
that was a game of emotion. I'm not gonna lie. I was literally doing a full Ron Burgundy. I was in a glass case of emotion. The early on in the game, I put a bit of pressure on. I knew I kind of like playing against Soulblight a fair few times, because I had enough sort of models and units on the board and ships. I kind of have to force them to kind of almost like tunnel, like compact themselves in, because as soon as Soulblight start going out left, right, and center all over the board, they're just impossible to try and like recoup on a mission where it's 6 objectives.
Yep.
So I had to play aggressive early just to sort of lure him off his own objectives and keep him in the midfield, because it was the 3 objectives
The
on
Fountains
his
of
side
Frost.
and three so on my side. So I sort of didn't want him to put too much pressure back onto me to try and take my objectives. Um, but in the first time ever, I've always done a an opening salvo battle tactic for Caradrons. I didn't get it this game because the amount of shots I put into dogs, and then he just kept rolling 5-ups, was just absolutely phenomenal. The Graveguard just didn't want to die either. There was just lots of things that just he was just rolling really well for, and it frustrated the living crap out of me because I was like, if I lose this game because of dice rolls, I'm going to be very upset.
Yep.
But there was one moment, and it was around turn three, that it just completely flipped on a dime, where Radukar and a bunch of Graveguard charged my clad. The clad unleashed hell into the Graveguard because that's what charged first. And I basically through lucky dice rolls in this instance, I knew it was like a 10 or 11 guys left in the squad. I nuked it down to one model.
Oh.
So by the time it made into combat, there was only one of them left. And then Radukar didn't do enough damage to heal back from his attacks. So then the Admiral turned around and bonked Radukar and killed him. And then the Arkanauts turned around and killed the rest of the Grave Guard. So he lost his good bonus ward save because he's taking Vikos. And I do apologize to Aaron for being extremely salty in the first two turns. Like I was beyond salt. There was so much salt.
Well,
Um,
at
and
one
I
point,
do,
Aaron did offer me like about $200 to just buy the set of dice that he was using because I was enforcing my dice.
yeah, yeah. I was honestly the first two times I was like, I'm so upset. But yeah, no, it ended up coming around after that because he started losing massive momentum. He couldn't upkeep it.
Yep.
But then when we went into because he doubled me. I was able to double him back, going from like I think it was turn 4 into turn 5. And when KO are able to double turn you, it's never a
Oh
good
yeah.
time. And I was able to bring it and claw it back and kill enough of the army because it's like he only had 6 up wars instead of 5 ups, etc., etc. So I was able to kill enough to actually bring that game back, and I won by 1 point.
Whew.
So that was super, super tight. It was a lot tighter than I wanted it to be. I was like, well, I first sold like before they can be extremely painful, but he doesn't have quite the number of units in this kind of mission. So I might, should be able to do some work here. It was looking very dicey to start, and then it just turned around at the end, and I managed to get a 1 point win. So
Yeah. Oh well, that's it. A 1 point win is still a win. So
yeah,
yeah, I often find that those games that you win by only 1 or 2 points, they're the more memorable ones. They're the fun ones that you look back on and like, yes, I did everything right in the end to eke out that little win, or you got lucky at that right point in time. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So,
So at this point in the day, you're 2 wins up, going into the finals, and your finals were against Brendan and his Stormcast. So this is another game that we recorded, being the kind of the top table at the event. And as I was watching and kind of judging that game, you guys looked like you were having a great time.
yeah, yeah. I always enjoy playing against Brendan, and I hope he enjoys playing against me to some degree. Uh, but like all the bad luck I had against Aaron in the first half of that game completely turned around when I played against Brendan.
Yep.
I couldn't fail saves. I couldn't fail anything essentially, and everything I just sort of looked at and just ended up dying.
Oh,
Dragons always kind of struggle against KO for Stormcast at the best of times. But he made one little mistake early, and I was able to capitalize on that. And then it just again, by sort of turn 3, turn 4, there wasn't much of the Stormcast left. So
yep. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, that's the KO doing KO things.
yeah.
And just kind of,
There's a reason why they're top of the meta at the moment.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that is, but yeah, so that is 3 games undefeated. So you took out the Gauntlet Series Finals 2024. Congratulations again. It is a huge achievement in my eyes. Any kind of exclusive invitational tournament that is only inviting kind of other top players is always a kind of a good event to be able to do well in, because you know that there's no easy games there. Every game is essentially the round 5 at a big 2-dayer, but it's always a lot of fun. You're hanging
Yeah.
out with the other top players in the area, all talking trash, and I'm pretty sure at one point you and me were dancing around just firing guns in the air.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like something I would do, 100%. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, fantastic result. The other people who walked away with awards was Matt Dale walked away with second after his loss to you in the first round, and then had a couple of really big solid wins. And I've completely mind blanked on who got third. It was
Brendan?
Brendan, or yes,
Brendan
yes.
came third.
Okay, we'll go. Brendan came third. I apologise massively. Uh, I've had a hectic day and I didn't get a chance to
Just the
review.
worst TO in the
Yeah.
world.
Oh,
Believe
yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't come to my events because if you don't come first, I'm going to forget who you are. So, and then Geordie picked up both best painted and best sports. He had some absolutely incredible games, so he
Yeah.
definitely deserved best sports for the day. So, but it was a fantastic day. It was a pleasure to TO everyone. There were a couple of really tight situations where I had to get called over just to double check the wording of a rule and like the exact distances, the exact wording. And that always comes out when you've got top players. So everyone
Yeah.
knows all the basic stuff really well, so you don't have to worry about any of that. So, but the other thing that I wanted to just chat with you quickly about is you mentioned at the start that when you saw kind of who else was invited, you completely changed how you built your list. So with that kind of research and kind of that knowledge of knowing some of the other players and the armies and the styles that I like to play, what else do you do to prepare for kind of like a more invitational exclusive top level event like this?
Um, well, certain players have certain armies, so it's kind of so like the list I I usually take was not the one that I took obviously to this one, and the reason why I took the list that I took was because of one player Geordie. His beastman with ambushing and stuff can really make a mess of KO. And cause me all sorts of dramas. So I needed some way of like padding that ambush, and taking a lot of Arcanauts was that kind of answer. Um, but I never ended up playing him, so it was just it just wasn't a thing. But yeah, like you just based on sort of what everybody had 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 taken and sort of the army lists that they were doing well with, I could kind of guess what everyone was going to bring, or at least the armies, not necessarily right down to the list, but at least the armies that they were going to take. And from there, you do have to change for your own local meta. You can't just build what
Yeah,
is considered to be like really good all the time. Sometimes it's better to just go off the beaten path a little bit and
yeah,
then change what you bring. So it's not always a good idea to just bring like top method stuff.
mm,
Sometimes you have to think about the other players that are coming to the event as well, because not more often than not, when I go to an event, there's always good players there who are bringing off meted lists. They're not taking the Soul Blights or the Ossiarchs, or not necessarily taking the Caradrons or the fucking Gloomspike Gits. They're
mm,
taking just sort of off kilted armies, maybe like slaves or something along those lines.
mm,
So you do have to think about them, because they are good players. You will have to play them eventually, more often than not. So you have to kind of think about what they're going to bring at events.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, okay. So really just kind of being kind of, as cheesy as it sounds, being in touch with the local meta and kind of knowing what the other players are thinking about and planning on.
that's more important more often than not than actually just trying to bring the top meta armies. As silly as that sounds,
Yeah.
because top meta armies can do you well, but it doesn't necessarily mean like good players are always thinking about top meta armies. So just because you bring a really good army doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do well, because more often than not, the good players are bringing something to counter those armies.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Especially
yeah,
in, even though I think the southeast Queensland scene is very healthy at the moment. Like the big events are selling out within minutes.
yep,
Smaller events are always full. Like I had pretty much a full host at every single Gauntlet event this year. It's really healthy, but also it's not that many people and individual kind of things to remember, especially if you've
yep,
got things like stats and ladders, or I do up all the results from the gauntlet. You can read about them, and I know that when I'm preparing for a big event, that's definitely something that I do. I look at the previous events. I look at the little one days that have happened in the last couple of months, even just to get a gist of like, oh, I know these five guys are coming. They're all good players. What did they play at the last event? Oh, they're playing OBR, Soul Blight, Slaves, and Fire Slayers. Cool. I need to make sure I have thought about how my matchup works against them.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's just it's just little things you have to think about when you're going to events. Not necessarily everything you have to think about. It's always better off just to bring something that you enjoy playing in general rather than trying to like be that super conscious. But if you're aiming to be very competitive, you do have to think about it. So
Yeah, yeah, no, and I
mm,
100% second that idea of playing what you're enjoying. I played like about 3 games of the new Seraphon when their book came out, and whilst their Starborn is ridiculously strong, I didn't enjoy playing it, so I switched wholly to Sylvaneth after that.
I'm always super suspicious of people who enjoy playing Seraphon. I'm not gonna lie.
I,
Uh,
I have got a great coalesced list that I am going to play for a bit, but it is
yeah,
in no way anything competitive. It is
yeah, yeah.
full of
It,
Carnosaurs, full of Agrodons, full of Stegodons, full of none of the things that make Seraphon an absolute powerhouse. So,
well, I'm looking to be playing Cruel Boys soon, so that'll
oh,
be
very
something
nice. Very
very
nice.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's kind of all the questions that I had for you. Congratulations again for taking out the Gauntlet Series 2024. And hopefully we will see you at the next event that I run, which should be Contest of Fools at the start of April up here in Toowoomba. So,
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Run a good event, so I always show up to them. I'm a bit of a tournament horse, so I kind of show up to all of them. But yeah, yeah, I always try and show up to an event when they're on in Queensland. It's always yeah, I always just like getting games in regardless. So
yeah. And that's the best way to support any TO who's running events is to show up to them. Because
yeah,
if you don't show up to an event, that TO won't keep running them. And then there will be less events and everyone loses. So,
yeah.
anyway, I will leave everyone there. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Paddy, do you have any final comments or any shout outs that you want to do before we call it?
Oh, really? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Well, let's finish up there. We'll see everyone next time. Bye.
Bye.